lands of Nihio, Plains Cree, Nakaway, Soto, Dakota Lakota, Lakota, and the home of the Métis. Respect and honor the treaties that were all made on all territories in Saskatchewan and are committed to move forward in partnership with First Nation and Métis people in spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Once again, welcome for today's session. My name is Raymond Reyes, Senior Immigration Officer with the SINP, together with Libby Morin, Manager of SINP, Michael Exner, Senior Officer from Recruitment Services Unit, and Fifi Ogonde from Senior Policy Analyst. We will be delivering this program changes and enhancements that is actually that took place, a series of changes that the program um, is implementing at the moment. A couple of house rules. If you'll notice, everyone's on mute except for me. So I'll be delivering the presentation throughout the session. If you have questions later, we'll have a designated time to answer some questions after the delivery of the session. If you would notice on your Q&As on the upper right, I would believe it says Q&A. You can start, or as we go on with our session, you can start typing your questions. And after I delivered the all discuss all the slides, we will have time to answer some questions. Um, we hope that we focus on the program changes that took place if for the benefit of everyone. Also, if you have specific questions, our office is open from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. You can always call us through our hotline or send us an email. Today's session is divided into 5 parts. So first, we'll discuss bilateral agreements and annual level plans. We'll give you a brief background on how we navigate or how we come up with allocations that we receive from the federal government every single year. We'll also reiterate what the purpose of SINP, and part two will be the SINP changes. What is SINP gonna do or implemented on how we manage or strategically align our programs to maintain its integrity while supporting our key economic factors. So with the priorities, we have 4 priorities that we'll be discussing today. Part three will be the SINP subcategory changes. We'll focus on the subcategories that's heavily affected with the program changes and enhancements. Part four will be federal immigration pathways, because given with all the changes that's implemented, not everyone will meet the criteria at the moment. There are alternative options that you can still become work and become permanent residents of Saskatchewan and Canada through the federal program streams. As I've mentioned, we'll be discussing the bilateral agreement and annual level plans of the federal government. The Canada-Saskatchewan immigration is a bilateral agreement that allows Saskatchewan to address its specific immigration needs, aligning with both of provincial priorities and national standards. These agreements recognize provinces as best suited to select immigrants to ensure that effective settlement. The framework establishes regular data exchanges between federal and provincial governments to monitor and evaluate immigration trends and outcomes, and allows Saskatchewan to design immigration streams that cater to its unique economic conditions. The annual immigration level plan is a strategic document released by Canadian federal government outlining immigration targets and objectives for the upcoming year. The 2025 to 2027 immigration level plans projects a significant reduction in permanent resident admissions, with target of approximately 395,000 in 2025 and 380,000 for next year, which is 2026. And for 2027, we have 365,000 permanent residents. This is down from the original 500,000 that the federal government was targeting for 2025 originally. Last year, Canada welcomed more than 483,000 new permanent residents, and Saskatchewan welcomed around 23,000 newcomers, which is the 4.8% of the total arrivals. The federal government sets the immigration levels for programs like the SINP annually. Volumes of newcomers are directly related to level plans tabled by the Canadian federal government each year. This inform both how many newcomers Saskatchewan can expect and as well as how many nominations SINP will be allocated. Given Saskatchewan's clear need for immigration, the SINP began 26 years ago and is responsible for three-quarters of newcomers to the province. Like other provincial nominee programs, the SINP is provincially administered economic immigration program, which allows Saskatchewan to nominate individuals who meet specific criteria that reflect province, province's labor market and economic needs. Similar to other programs, entry prerequisites and selection criteria vary by category and are based on several variables. As we all know, immigration fuels Saskatchewan population and labor force growth. From 2007 to 2024, we have welcomed approximately 204 newcomers from 187 countries in approximately 461 Saskatchewan communities. SINP drives to Saskatchewan's accounting for over 75% of newcomers in the province each year since 2022. So in a nutshell, what happened was originally we were given 500,000 permanent residents throughout Canada, and it was reduced to 360 for approximately around 395,000 for this year. So with the reduction, we're our nomination from 7,290 allocation was down to 3,625. You might be wondering why it's aggressive, because it's 50%. It's because 395,000 is divided among three immigration categories of immigration. We have family sponsorship, we have humanitarian reasons, and finally, economic immigration. Provincial nominee programs such as SINP falls under economic immigration. So today we'll be sharing the comprehensive changes implementing the Saskatchewan Immigrant Nominee Program in response to federal directives. So given the 50% cut, so from 2024, it's 7,290. Now we're down to 3,625 this year. Additionally, with a given allocation, the federal government now requires 75% of our nomination to go to individuals already in Canada as temporary residents. When we mention temporary residents, it excludes the people who are on visitor's visa. As I've mentioned before earlier, SINP strategically realign or renavigate how we are gonna manage our federal reduction. So our response is structured around four key priorities, which is managing reduced allocations, reducing red tape, supporting the labor market, and strengthening program integrity. These priorities work together to ensure we can maximize the impact of reduced allocations while maintaining program integrity and focusing on Saskatchewan's economic priorities. To manage or reduce allocation effectively, we're implementing sector caps for industries that have historically shown poor retention outcomes. Um, those sectors include accommodation, food services, retail trade, and trucking sectors, which will be limited to 25% of all SINP nominations. And nominations in this sector must be for workers already in Canada as temporary residents. This allows us to prevent any sector from disproportionately utilizing our limited allocation. We'll also be returning applications without job offers, with application fees refunded should those categories are express entry and occupations in demand, and applications from non-temporary residents in our cap sectors. So free application or your industry that you fall under the mentioned sector and you're not a temporary resident of Canada, chances are you have received or you returned the application. Additionally, we have returned employer applications, which are JAVs that do not identify existing temporary resident, except for those priority sectors, which is health, agriculture, and skills trade. These measures will help us meet the federal requirement of 75% of nominations go to temporary residents while supporting our key economic sectors. To reduce administrative burdens, we're simplifying several processes. Licensures or certification requirements will only apply to candidates in occupations where these credentials are legally mandated. For example, engineers and certain health occupations. This reduces paperwork both for workers and employers while maintaining necessary standards. Also, public sector employers will be able to use simplified process for submission of job approval forms. We're also adding a flexibility for unionized employers to transition existing workers into roles they're qualified for but may lack direct experience. This responds to concerns identified by employers who face challenges in retaining employees. A third priority focuses on Saskatchewan's labor market needs. For student category, applicants must now demonstrate that they have graduated from a designated learning institution in Saskatchewan, have relevant work experience with a Saskatchewan employer, and maintain residency in the province throughout their studies and work experience. This addresses retention concerns and prevents program misuse. Program postgraduate work permit holders will no longer be eligible to apply in restricted occupations. Both postgraduate work permit holders from Saskatchewan and other provinces are still eligible to apply under International Skilled Worker Employment Offer category, Health Talent Pathway, and Agriculture Talent Pathway. This further addresses concerns that ensures that the program serves its intended purpose. Additionally, the eligibility criteria for low-skilled designated trades, such as industrial butchers and hotel front desk clerks, will be adjusted to ensure these occupations are only eligible through subcategories intended for lower-skilled workers, rather than those intended for high-skilled occupations. Finally, building on the framework established by Immigration Services Act last summer, we're implementing several measures to strengthen program integrity. Certain business types with poor retention outcomes will no longer be eligible for the program, including spas, nail salons, and pet care services. This excludes veterinarians. We're also changing spousal open work permit holders for SIP eligibility due to higher risk of exploitation and poor retention outcomes. Open spousal work permits are only eligible through Health Talent Pathway, Agricultural Talent Pathway, and International Skilled Worker Employment Offer subcategory. Other open work permits, including postgraduate work permit holders, LMIA-based permits, and international mobility program participants, will remain eligible for certain SINP pathways, as noted earlier. In addition to work noted already, we're collaborating with the federal counterparts in limiting recruitment through the temporary foreign worker program for certain occupations that pose significant integrity risks. Finally, we're also implementing revenue requirements and recruitment caps. As part of the program integrity measures, we're implementing minimum revenue requirements for businesses in hospitality and trucking sectors that wish to recruit foreign workers. All Saskatchewan employers need to apply for a certificate of registration before they can hire foreign workers. And to improve program integrity and ensure financial stability, hospitality and trucking businesses will need to meet a revenue requirement and subject to workforce caps as part of the COR application. These businesses in these sectors will be subject to caps, ensuring that no more than 30% of their workforce is composed of foreign workers. This aligns with the government's strategies on labor market, which notes that residents of Saskatchewan should have the first opportunity to fill these job vacancies. Businesses will need to provide documentation such as financial statements and tax filings to demonstrate they meet the revenue thresholds. Our team will verify this information as part of the application process. Additionally, we'll conduct ongoing compliance checks to ensure business continue to meet these requirements while participating in the program. These revenue thresholds serves two important purposes. First, they will help ensure financial stability of businesses hiring foreign workers, reducing the risk that workers will arrive to find unstable employment. And second, this helps reduce program misuse by businesses that may not have financial capacity to sustain the position they're offering. So those are the main program changes, but we'll focus now with the SINP subcategories. So before I proceed with the affected subcategories, let me reiterate that these subcategories would have a common ground. First is the intent to reside in Saskatchewan on a permanent basis. Saskatchewan as not just the pathway, but a destination permanently. Number two, a job offer must be in place from a Saskatchewan registered employer that resulted a valid job approval letter. So we'll be tackling more on subcategories. We're not gonna be in details, but if you have questions, feel free to put it on our Q&A sections. So we will highlight, for the purpose of this session, we'll highlight on the changes that has been implemented. First is the student category. Students who graduated with a diploma, certificate, or degree from a recognized post-secondary education institution in Saskatchewan. So minimum of 1 year or 8 full months of full-time study. So have worked for 6 months. This is always the confusion among candidates. They think it's always either or, but it's actually both. Someone or a student should have worked for 6 months. Within that 6 months, you should have worked a minimum of 780 hours of paid employment in Saskatchewan related to the field of your studies. As noted earlier, only postgraduate work permit holders that studied and graduated in Saskatchewan are eligible to apply through the student subcategory stream. Your 6 months of work experience must be related to your field of studies. So this work experience doesn't necessarily have to be on the postgraduate work permit. It could be while you're still studying. It could be a combination of more than one employer, as long as it was paid and it was related to what you have studied. Health occupations are eligible to apply under the student subcategory. A post-graduation work permit must be in place at the time of application. As I've mentioned, you must have a job offer from Saskatchewan employer. Um, the tier level should be 0, 1, 2, or 3, or any designated trade. If your NOC tier falls under um, 4 or 5, then you must provide a language test. Moving forward for the second subcategory, existing work permit. You must have work for at least 6 months or 780 hours of paid employment in Saskatchewan with a supporting employer on a valid work permit. The work experience must be consecutive. It cannot be a combination of more than one, each to be the same employer offering you the job. Postgraduate work permit holders and open spousal work permits are not eligible under this pathway. You must have an offer of NOC Tier 0, 1, 2, or 3, or in any designated trade. However, there are some exceptions. If you are a holder of SUIT or Canada-Ukraine authorization for emergency travel, you have a labor market impact assessment or francophone mobility. You can apply under tiers 4 and 5, supplemented with a language test. Third subcategory is health talent pathway. For health talent pathway, we have two sub pathways, which is express entry and non-express entry. So as I mentioned earlier, you must intend to reside in Saskatchewan on a permanent basis. You must have a job offer from a Saskatchewan employer and be eligible for Saskatchewan licensing. Postgraduate work permit holders graduated outside Saskatchewan, and as I've mentioned earlier, open spousal work permits are eligible under this subcategory. For both express entry and non-express entry pathways, you must have a minimum of 2 years of post-secondary education that relates to job that you have been offered. So as I've mentioned earlier with the student, if you're a student, you can actually apply and you've graduated from Saskatchewan and your offer is health-related NOC. However, you do not meet the condition or the criteria of having at least 1 year because having 2 years of post-secondary education, such as let's say continuing care aid, you only studied for a certificate for 1 year. Based on the criteria under health talent pathway, you'll not qualify. However, for the purpose of SINP, since you graduated here, you can apply under the student category, given that you meet the criteria set on that specific subcategory. We also have a few exceptions among these non-regulated occupations. 2-year diploma in any field will suffice. So I'll leave that for now. So we have 5 non-regulated occupations. We'll focus now with express entry. You must have at least 1 year full-time work experience the past 5 years in your intended occupation. The work experience doesn't necessarily have to be with the employer offering you the job. You should have a minimum language test score of CLB 7 that matches the CLB level on your federal express entry profile. You must have a job offer on health sector job in Saskatchewan. Approximately, we have 44 health-related NOCs. If you are wanting to see the specific list of NOCs under Health Talent Pathway, I invite you to check our website, saskatchewan.ca/SINP, and proceed with Health Talent Pathway. You must also have a valid express entry profile number or job seeker validation code, meaning you have a profile with the IRCC or the federal, and you're in the pool. For the non-express entry option, you can either have 1 year full-time of work experience in the past 5 years, or must have worked 6 months with a paid employment in Saskatchewan with your Saskatchewan employer on a valid work permit. Minimum language test score of CLB 5, and then an offer of eligible permanent full-time health sector job in Saskatchewan. For the purpose of this session, let me just mention that the big difference between non-express entry and express entry is that express entry may have higher requirements. However, in terms, the big deciding factor, that's why lots of people would opt to apply under express entry, is the processing times. So processing times for express entry is approximately 6 months upon submission, upon invitation and submission of an application, while non-express entry would follow the processing time of a typical provincial nominee program, which I believe around 20 to 21 months as we speak. So we always encourage, if you meet the express entry option, you might want to opt to apply under express entry stream. Moving forward, for subcategories, the agricultural talent pathway. For the work experience criteria, we have 2 options. You must have at least 1 full-time work experience the past 3 years in your intended occupation. It doesn't necessarily have to be the employer offering you the job, or 780 hours throughout the 6 months of your full-time employment in the job with the supporting employer. You must have completed secondary school or higher level of education. And you must have at least CLB 4, and again, have an offer of eligible permanent full-time agriculture sector job and a valid job approval letter. When you say full-time, minimum hours per week should be 30 hours. And as I mentioned, the work experience, if you're going to the route of full-time, 1 year, experience doesn't need to be consecutive. These are the eligible occupations. As you may notice, some occupations would have asterisks. Those occupations that require sponsoring employer under the NICS or NICS, which still falls under agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting. For the benefit of everyone, NICS is North American Industry Classification System. It's a numerical identifier that's used to classify businesses by the primary activity. Because if you would notice, not necessarily those jobs would fall under agriculture sector, but since the criteria is under agriculture, you might be performing those jobs in the industry under agriculture. How I see it is that NOx is to jobs and NICS is to the industry of the business. Finally, we'll be discussing international skilled worker employment offer category. You must have at least 1 year of work experience in the past 10 years in your intended occupation. Your work experience could be anywhere in the world, and it could be a combination of more than one work experience. If you have an open work permit, you must also have worked for at least 6 months in Saskatchewan with your supporting employer. Meaning, you should still meet the 1 year. You should have 1 year work experience. But given that if you have an open work permit, 6 months of that 1 year should be with the employer supporting your application. So it could be 6 months from a different employer plus 6 months from your supporting employer, which will result for a 1 year work experience. If You have a complete 1 year work experience, but it was not earned from the employer offering you the job. You must work for another 6 months with the employer on providing you with a job approval. Open work permits include postgraduate work permit holders, whether graduated in Saskatchewan or outside the province, and open spousal work permit holders. You must also meet at least 60 points on SINP assessment grade, and your permanent full-time job offer from Saskatchewan employer must fall under 0, 1, 2, or 3. If you have mentioned, um, we remove the designated trades because some designated trades fall under um, NOx 4 and 5. As I've mentioned earlier, with the changes that we're implementing, we are reserving basically those designated trades that falls under NOC 4 and 5 for low skilled applicants. You must have a language test score of CLB 4 and be eligible for licensing if your intended occupation is a compulsory apprenticeship trade, or it or the government legally requires you to provide licensure. We know for a fact that not based on these changes, not everyone might be meeting the criteria. But as I've mentioned earlier, we still want to provide you alternative options. Just because you do not meet the SINP doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to make it through um, the labor market as a temporary foreign worker, or and eventually become a permanent resident. We also providing you federal immigration pathways, but I'm only be providing you some brief background. If you're wanting to get the full details, we invite you to check the website of IRCC. So aside from provincial nominee programs such as SINP, there are federal immigration pathways available to candidates that include temporary or permanent resident options. So temporary foreign worker pathways, um, we have temporary foreign worker program, which allows Canadian employers to hire foreign nationals to fill labor shortages by undertaking labor market impact assessment, which indicates that no Canadian workers are available to fill job opening. Once the employer receives a letter confirming the job opening qualifies, a worker may then apply for a temporary foreign worker work permit. On the other hand, we have also International Mobility Program, or IMP, which allows employers to hire foreign nationals without need to obtain LMIA. Exemptions from LMIA process are based on broader economic, cultural, or other competitive advantages for Canada and reciprocal benefits enjoyed by Canadians and permanent residents. So the big difference between TFWP and IMP is that TFWP, it must come from an employer first because a job needs to be filled and there's no right person, no one identified locally. So they resort to applying to ESDC. And then once you get a positive LMIA, an applicant applies for a closed work permit. In terms of international mobility program, it doesn't necessarily come, the initiative doesn't necessarily come from an employer. Some examples of IMPs are francophone mobility because we want to provide or we promote French and francophone communities. We also have intra-company transfers and international experience class, which are eligible for certain countries. Once a person has gained enough work experience in Canada, you might want to look into these permanent residence application pathways or applicant pathways. First is Economic Mobility Pathways Pilot. The Economic Mobility Pathways Pilot enables skilled refugees and displaced people to immigrate permanently to Canada through economic programs. This program connects qualified refugee candidates with Canadian employers facing labor shortages. Applicants must apply directly from outside Canada, either in the job stream or no job offer stream. There are three sets of eligibility requirements that the applicant must meet to apply. The person must meet to apply must be a first, the applicant must be a refugee or a displaced person. The applicant must meet language, education, and work experience requirements of the job offer if they're applying through the job offer stream. If they're applying on the no job offer stream, then they are required to have at least 1 year of full-time employment or equivalent part-time work experience in high-skilled occupation in the past 3 years. They also must show that they have sufficient settlement funds to support themselves and their families in Canada. The final requirement is that the applicant must be admissible to Canada. Next pathway is Canadian Experience Class. This pathway program is for foreign workers who have eligible Canadian work experience and want to become permanent residents. Work experience must be full-time, paid, and applicant must have at least 1 year of skilled work experience within the last 3 years. This specific pathway is very popular among postgraduate work permit holders after a given certain of time. Let's say, for example, they worked and earned work experience with their postgraduate work permit. They may want to look into this specific pathway. They may be able to qualify. Third federal pathway is the Federal Skilled Trades Program, which is for skilled workers who wants to become permanent residents based on being qualified on a skilled trade. Applicants must have at least 2 years of paid work experience in trade, select occupations in natural resources, agriculture, and related production and processing, or such as chef, cook, butcher, or baker. Fourth permanent resident applicant pathway is the Federal Skilled Worker Program. It is for intended skilled workers who have eligible foreign or Canadian work experience and want to become permanent residents. Eligible applicants must have at least one continuous year of paid skilled work experience in the last 10 years. We also have the rural and francophone community immigration pilots, which is a permanent residency pathway for skilled workers seeking to live in one of the 18 smaller Canadian communities. Applicants need a valid job offer, more than a year, ideally, of work experience, relevant work experience within the past 3 years, and have sufficient settlement funds. These pilots replace the rural and northern immigration pilot, with Moose Jaw being the only Saskatchewan eligible community among the 18 selected communities. And finally, we have the home care workers caregivers pilot. This new pathway is to provide pathways for permanent residency for skilled workers who work in home childcare or home support. There will be 2 application streams at IRCC's current. Actually, it opened March 31st, but last time I checked, it got filled with applications already, and we're hoping that it reopens soon. So, but for the benefit of everyone, we still have to have a background on this one. We might consider applying under this stream once it reopens. As I mentioned, there will be 2 application streams, but IRCC is, well, only accepted applications for workers in Canada stream. applicants must have a minimum of CLB 4, meet the settlement fund requirement, and have a minimum of Canadian high school diploma or equivalent, and have 6 months of continuous full-time relevant work experience in the past 10 years, or completed relevant training credential in the past 2 years. That concludes our presentation for today. We will now proceed with question and answer. As I've mentioned, we're going to utilize the Q&A option above your screens. Before we proceed with open our floor, once again, I'd like to, on behalf of the SINP, we'd like to thank everyone for continued support and interest in the province. I know it's a very difficult time for everyone right now because given the reduction, but at the end of the day, we still want to go back to our core. And because with the changes, lots of people are affected, but with our guiding principle still up today, we still remain to our very core purpose, which is to attract people who wants to work and be part of labor force in Saskatchewan, and of course help our economy in the province. It might be hard right now because not everyone at the moment, as and you know, immigration is very dynamic. It keeps on changing, but hopefully in the future you will qualify and become part of Saskatchewan. Again, thank you very much for continued support. So we will now proceed with question and answer. As I've mentioned, if at any point we won't be able to answer your question because it's too specific, I'll leave the contact information on your screen so you can take a screenshot. You can always email us or call us, or even if you're in Regina, you can feel free to come by our office. We're on the 7th floor, Grenfell Tower. But if you're from further communities, you will receive basically the same service. You can call us at 1-833-613-0485 or send us an email, immigration@gov.sk.ca. Once again, my name is Raymond Reyes, and we're moving forward now with Q&A with Libby Morin, the manager of TSINP. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much, Raymond. So I will start going through the Q&A, and my colleague Michael will help me answer some questions that are more related to the job approval letter process. So the first question we have is, does a job for the SINP purposes need to be full-time, or is a casual worker position eligible? So for all of our job offer subcategories in our agreements with the IRCC, they do need to be full-time permanent positions. And so when we say full-time, it needs to be at least 30 hours a week. And permanent, we can consider a term position if it's at least 2 years. So when we say permanent, we more so mean at least 2 years. But yes, so we need the full-time permanent, and unfortunately are not able to accept casual work experience. Or pardon me, like a casual work position. So somebody has asked, I am working in the healthcare sector, but I have a spousal work permit. Which pathway can I apply to? So as Raymond discussed, open spousal work permit holders are now only eligible to apply under the agriculture talent pathway, the health talent pathway, and the international skilled worker employment offer category. As you're in the healthcare sector, the health talent pathway would be the option for you. Michael, question for you. I have applied for my job approval letter on March 18th, so will I be affected by the 25% cap or not?
Yeah, I'm assuming there's a typo there, and it should say March 28th, as job approvals were paused on the 18th of March. If your job
Yeah,
approval,
you're probably right.
yeah, if the position submitted falls under the occupations and organizations that would fall under the 25% cap, it would be impacted by that.
Does the 1 year of work experience required for international skilled worker employment offer stream have to be obtained in Canada, or will we consider work experience from outside of Canada? So for the international skilled worker employment offer stream, we consider both Canadian and international work experience. My employer applied for a job approval letter in the food sector in February 2025 before the cap. How will this impact my JAF application?
So if it is in the NAIC-NOC combination that falls under the cap, then the application will be held and will not be processed. Even if processing had started on it, it will be paused at this time, unless we get direction later in the year that we need to open up more spots in that area in order to hit our nomination target.
Is the tech talent pathway open and accepting applications? Yes, the tech talent pathway is open. You do have to have a job approval letter to apply under that category. And there are no caps on those tech sector occupations. Is a 1 year minimum Saskatchewan work experience mandatory for applicants holding a postgrad work permit? So this depends. If you are applying under the student category, you only need 6 months work experience in a job related to your field of study. But if you have a postgrad work permit and you studied outside of Saskatchewan, you now need to come through the International Skilled Worker Employment Offer category. And in that category, you need to meet both the requirement that you have at least 1 year work experience in the past 10 years, and when you are an open work permit holder, such as a postgrad work permit holder, at least 6 months of your work experience that you're claiming needs to be with your supporting employer. My sector is capped, but my occupation is not on the list of this sector. Can I still apply without the cap? So Michael, do you want to maybe talk about how we're the combined cap?
Sure. So the 25% sector caps for accommodation, food service, retail, trade, and the trucking sector is not just a flat out cap based on the NAIC for the employer, but it's a combination of the NAIC and the NOC code applications, and the NOCs that are restricted within those NAICs vary by sector. So if the sector appears under the cap list, but the national occupation or NOC for your occupation does not appear on that list, the job approval form will be reviewed against the current required criteria. Yeah, so your employer can submit it, and we'll review it against current current requirements.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Do businesses need to reapply for their employer certification with these changes? Do we have anybody from employer, or pardon me, program compliance on the line? If we do, I don't know if they're set up to speak.
I can
I don't
take this
believe
one.
they need to. Yeah, you want to go, Michael? Yeah.
Sure. So an employer will not need to reapply for their certificate of registration due to these changes. There are certain things around employment levels and financial levels for certain industries that have come into play with these changes. Those will be reviewed when the employer either applies for the first time for a certificate or during the renewal process. Yeah, so if there's any specific questions around those, I would recommend that individuals reach out to the PCB or employer.registration@gov.sk.ca email address.
Thank you. So next question, what's the option if the quota is filled for the student stream? So we don't actually have a quota on our student stream at this time. That said, with our overall quota is 3,625. I think it's fair to say we do expect to um, be fully subscribed with our nomination. So we don't have a quota on the student stream, but at some point, if and when we do reach our maximum allocation, we won't be able to nominate any additional files for the year. So at that point, people would need to either look at other immigration pathways, such as federal pathways, or applying in the new year when we have a new allocation. What happens if I start the process and during the process I have issues at work and I decide to leave that work? Is the process canceled? So a few different things here. If you're already nominated with a supporting employer and you need to leave that employer, first of all, we never want to hear that somebody has feels that they have to stay in a problematic situation. So if you're being mistreated at work, please contact us, and we can and talk to you about your options. But if you leave your employer, you will be given time to find a new job offer and a new job approval letter, and you'll need to continue meeting the conditions of your nomination as it is. So it's not like if you leave or say you lose your job, you'll have your nomination revoked right away. You'll be given time, but you will need to find a new job and a new job approval letter. Um, if this happens before you're nominated, it would be the same type of thing. You'd need to find a new employer and ensure you still meet the criteria of one of our categories. Is there any subcategory in which someone who is still in school can apply to? So really, if you're here on a study permit, it's not our intention for people to be dropping out of school to apply for the SIMP. So you really are encouraged to complete your studies. My previous work was not in my area. I have about 2 years in different workplaces that were not in my knock, and I just completed 6 months in the knock that I want to apply for. Can I apply right now for international skilled worker? So if you're talking about international skilled worker employment offer, you do need to have, in addition to meeting the 60 point score on the grid, you do need at least a minimum 1 year of full-time experience in your intended knock. So we can't combine different knocks into one. It needs to be all in your intended occupation. That would be the only experience we can count. So if you only have 6 months in your intended occupation, you won't be able to apply until you have another 6 months. Yeah. Do we expect the next election to have further changes in your program? We're not sure. Just like anybody else, we are not sure how the results of an election will change or not change things. Can Tim Hortons apply for the JAL as a tier, baker apply for JAL as tier 3? So a baker at Tim Hortons would be captured under our NAICS knock cap as it is in the food service. So at this point, the employer could apply for a job approval letter, but as Michael said, it will likely be held for now as we have reached the cap. I have applied for LMIA-based work permit for a position of accounting technician and bookkeeper. If my work permit's approved after 6 months, am I eligible to apply under SIMP for PR? Michael, so is the accounting and accounting technician and bookkeeper, is that now fully restricted?
Just let me double check the list here.
Sure. Thank you. Just a second, everyone.
Sorry, I was in the wrong FAQ there. Just be a moment longer. Why don't we move on to the next
Sure.
question here, Libby, and I'll come back with a response here before the end of the
Okay,
session.
sounds good. What does requirement that all sectors nominations be only for existing temporary residents mean? Does it mean visitors in Canada are eligible, but outside Canada no longer eligible? So for the purposes of the provincial nominee program, the federal government has advised us that people on visitor visas do not count as temporary residents. So when we say temporary residents and flipping those people to um, permanent residents, those would be people who are here on work permits. So we do need that 75% of our limited allocation needs to be
Sorry?
dedicated to flipping temporary
Great, thank you.
residents to permanent residents.
I cannot seem to find it now.
Will applications be returned to individuals who got their nominations in 2025? If you've already been nominated, you won't have your nomination returned. You've already been nominated, you're good to proceed with your PR application. Does the employer need a certificate of registration if the existing employee has an open work permit? If your employer is going to use the SINP, they need a certificate of registration always, even if the employee they want to support is on an open work permit. That sort of language that you're referencing on the website just means if an employer wants to hire somebody who's on an open work permit, um, they can hire them without a certificate of registration. But if they were wanting to hire somebody through the temporary foreign worker program, or they want to support somebody through the SINP, they do need to have a certificate of registration. I just moved to Saskatchewan. I'm under the tech pathway. Do I need a job offer from a Saskatchewan an employer here in Saskatchewan? Is my work experience in Ontario counted? So for all of our job offer categories, you do need a job offer from an employer in Saskatchewan. Your work experience in Ontario would be counted. Job approval letter. So I'm back sort of to these accounting technicians, Mike. If you're in a job offer exclusion occupation, such as accounting technician, are you exempt if you hold a postgraduate work permit? So you're referencing the PDF used to have exemptions for PGWPs. So now going forward, Raymond talked about this while presenting. We've removed those exemptions for postgrad work permit holders. So the restriction or exclusion list does apply to postgrad work permit holders now. How many months is the validation of a job approval letter? How long is a JAL valid?
So if the JAL was approved for international recruitment, it is valid for 6 months. If it is approved for an existing employee of the organization, it is valid for 60 days. And just while I'm
Oh yeah,
on
go ahead,
here,
please.
we did find the current version of the PDF, so I can confirm that accounting technicians and bookkeepers, unless the candidate is currently working in Saskatchewan under a valid LMIA or QITS work permit. So they have to be working on one of those two work permit types to be eligible, unless they are working for an organization that is excluded from using the program. Then it wouldn't matter regardless.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If the job approval was approved before March 27th, 2025, and the employer decided to hire a foreign national outside Canada, will the new policy changes affect the candidate's nomination application? Yes. So unless you're applying from outside of Canada in either the healthcare, agriculture, or skilled trades, we will we'll be returning the application for folks who are not in Canada. Does full-time experience garnered under study permit count for a post-grad work permit holder for the international skilled pathway? And does the work experience necessarily have to be related to what one studied in school, or could it be from an unrelated field? So for the student category, all of your work experience that you're claiming now does need to be related to your field of study. We can count up part-time hours to contribute to your 6-month requirement. Just keep in mind, like, we can only count hours you worked that you were legally entitled to. So aside from some COVID era public policies, which have since been removed, or when you're on break, you can only work 20 hours off or 24 hours off campus a week now, I think. So if you were working extra hours that weren't legal, we can't count those. If I'm a citizen, is there any category to apply for siblings who are already here on a work permit? So under the SINP, we are an economic program, so we don't have any family reunification sort of options. Your sibling could potentially submit an expression of interest into our expression of interest pool, our EOI pool. We don't have any scheduled draws at this time because of the requirement to have our allocation mostly dedicated to temporary residents, although in some cases people in the EOI pool are temporary residents. So they could submit, I would encourage them to always, submit an EOI profile because they can claim points for having a close relative in Saskatchewan. But otherwise you may need to be looking at federal pathways. For the health talent pathway, do we need to be presently residing in Saskatchewan or can we apply from outside? You can be residing outside of Saskatchewan for the health talent pathway as it is one of our prioritized sectors for the year. Can a study permit holder be eligible to apply for PR after graduation but not on a postgrad work permit yet? So for the purposes of the SIMP and the student category, you do need to have your postgrad work permit in hand. I know that some people are really eager and it can take, a little bit of time to get that postgrad work permit, but for the SIMP, you do need to already have it. I'm not able to speak to how that would apply to any federal pathways. I don't know, Raymond, do we have any other questions? Maybe it's 11 o'clock, but we might be able to answer a couple more. But in the meantime, I do want to let you know, I know there's lots of questions and we can't get to all of them, but please do call us or send us an email and we'll be happy to help. When can we expect a draw for EOI? So as I mentioned, we do encourage people to keep an active EOI profile so that you can be considered for future recruitment initiatives or in the event that we do have a draw. But at this time, because of the size of our application inventory and our need to focus on temporary residents being converted into permanent residents, we don't have any plans for an EOI draw this year. But that said, just because I don't know of any plans at this point doesn't mean it's not possible for that to occur. And then the last question I'll answer is my recent work experience doesn't align with what I studied, but my previous work experience aligns. Is that an issue? If you have the 6 months of work experience in Saskatchewan and you graduate in Saskatchewan, it shouldn't be an issue. And same as if you're applying through international skilled worker employment offer. But that said, you do need to have work experience with your supporting employer for the international skilled worker employment offer. This one's tricky. I'd have to know more about your situation, so I might encourage you to actually email us in with a little bit more detail. Hey, well, thank you so much, everybody. We really appreciate this. And please, again, email us, call us anytime if you have questions. Thank you and have a great day. And thanks to our presenters and to Michael. Bye.